Welcome to the Francis Clark Center's webinar series. Our broadcast will begin shortly. In addition to webinars, we also offer a robust selection of teaching resources on our website, claviercompanion.com. These resources include archives of all articles from our print publication, Piano Magazine, intermediate and advanced repertoire video series, one-on-one mentorship opportunities, and information about our in-person education opportunities such as NCKP The Piano Conference and summer intensives. Make sure to follow us on our social media platforms to get updates on all of these resources and more. As always, thank you for your loyal support of the Francis Clark Center and our many divisions. We are grateful to be in service to such an amazing and ever-growing group of educators and musicians. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the broadcast.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So it's Fabienne and I are so pleased to be here today and to have a chance to share some resources and connect with all of you on this topic. Managing economic challenges in disruptive times. And just as a starting point, we wanted to give you an overview of how we plan to cover the webinar content. So our plan today is basically, this is a huge topic, obviously, is to cover two topics related to this theme or this larger topic. And these sort of two subtopics are first, managing economic disruption, which we're going to speak to first. And then secondly, we're going to talk about building your own brand umbrella in our virtually connected but disrupted circumstances. So we're going to spend a few minutes introducing some content for the first topic, and we'd invite you all to use the chat function to list any questions that you have. Typically, when it comes to something like managing economic disruption, most of us are thinking about very specific circumstances that we're dealing with related to our own teaching performance, professional practice. And so to just maximize our capacity to provide information and dialogue with you in a personalized, interactive way, we encourage you to just put any questions you have about that first topic as we discuss it in the chat. And in addition to sharing some general resources, we'll be trying to address those questions specifically. And then let's say about 20 minutes in, we'll be transitioning into the second topic. And at that time, we'll invite you to, sort of transition questions onto that topic, which is building a brand umbrella. Obviously, there's some overlap, but we think this flow will work well for our conversation. And we'll stop periodically to address those questions along the way. All right.
Thank you, Jonathan. That's a great overview. And yes, I agree that we definitely want to make this experience as interactive and relevant as possible. So feel free to chime in as many questions as you can. And even if we don't have enough time to answer all of them during our webinar, we will be compiling a kind of a cheat sheet at the end with the key takeaways. So the more input you provided with your questions, the more information we'll have to be able to make the best resource at the end to summarize all of our points. So why don't we just dive in?
Sounds good. Okay, I'll give just a really brief statement, and I'm going to turn it back over to Fabiana to give some specific examples. So the reality we all are facing right now is a sudden transition, right, to a virtual environment few of us expected. And we're confronted with questions about how to maintain our portfolio of activity. We presume that there are folks in this call right now that are engaged in a portfolio of activity that might involve teaching, but also performance work. We'd love to hear about those specific examples. And in all those cases, we're all juggling the need to support our financial needs despite the isolating limitations imposed by technology, as I'm sure all of us have discovered who've had to transition to teaching online in the last few weeks. So beyond just the short-term question of staying afloat, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the direct adaptations that can be helpful in managing this sort of transition in a disrupted virtual circumstance. But we also want to ask the question of how to manage this scenario to strengthen your business model. What are the opportunities inherent in this crisis that could be that we could sort of look at to help us improve the way that we go about our business as musicians and educators? And also we'll ask the question, what new kinds of value could you add? Are there things that might be possible using this virtual technology and connectivity that seems to be more ubiquitous than ever, that might actually open up new ways of adding value? So we're going to talk about that first. So I'm going to turn it over to Fabiana to share some insights on that.
Sure. Thank you, Jonathan. I think a great way to look at the situation we're in is to step away from only figuring out how to manage the reality we are in, where everything has to be switched to online. And for many of us, it's a very first time to do this. And instead to realize that this pandemic has pretty much created a new moment in history where it will be very difficult for everything to go back to normal when this ends. And to see this as the beginning of a new reality, the beginning of a new society, and a new way of just doing business as musicians and educators. And to think of what are the parts of this current challenge that can actually help you reinvent yourself as an entrepreneur, as a piano educator, as a musician, and think about when things go back to normal, what are you going to be doing? If you think you're going to be going back to everything the way it was, then you may be in for a surprise, because even on the customer side, parents and students are not going to expect things to be done the same way they were, because there will be so many more options, especially as it relates to online options and online offerings. So when you're redesigning and thinking, well, how can I reinvent myself now? I'm so overwhelmed with just figuring out how to just survive. And instead, if you think, okay, what are the aspects of my current model that, even though I never did them before, are working for me? In which ways am I now optimizing my delivery of instruction, my efficiency in operations, in being more strategic and economical in the way I run my teaching studio, or whatever it is that you're doing? And think, how can I keep these and use them to maximize my impact? So for example, in the cases of piano teachers, we have a lot of piano teachers that are in this community. You may be thinking, I just need to keep my current students happy and, keep them with their expectations satisfied, and just hope that this passes. And as soon as things go back to normal, so will I. And instead, if you think, how can I use this time to actually flip the model of my teaching studio, where instead of teaching online for the time being, I explore ways that I could actually keep an online setup, if not entirely, but partially, to continue growing my studio beyond my current population. In other words, to expose yourself to the rest of the world, to start recruiting students from all over the world that you could potentially continue teaching when things go back to normal. You are not limited to your current students. You do not have to think only of meeting their needs, but now exploring, how can you grow? How can you find new students? That's a specific example of ways that you can start expanding what you're currently doing. The other way is thinking in terms of exchanging time for money. When we are teaching, the traditional models up until now have been heavily based on exchanging time for money. So you have an hourly rate that you teach and you get paid for that. But the problem with that model is that when you run out of time, you run out of income opportunities because you're maxed out. So for many of you, you have been teaching with this model because it's kind of like the standard. But now you have an opportunity to create different business models where you're offering packages and you're creating a certain program that has a specific transformation and opportunity to solve a problem for a group of students. And you do not have to make it only based on the amount of time, but you can actually make it based on the result and the transformation you can provide. So instead of thinking I'm going to offer 4 lessons a week for infinity, if you think of as creating packages of lessons where you have, let's say, a 6-month program with a specific outcome, which includes weekly meetings, but not necessarily limited to that. You can add more value opportunities where you can have guest speakers, where you can have master classes, group settings. Now you don't need for everybody to be driving to a specific location. You can have everyone connect virtually. So thinking about ways that you can add more value to the current pricing options allows you to change your model to not only be teaching versus like having a time and being paid for that time, but instead to create packages where you create a price point for these packages and you can offer a different pricing structure. So you have, depending on the amount of things you put in this package, you can charge a totally different price point based on the transformation you're promising and the outcome you're proposing. So I'm going to let Jonathan chime in if he has any thoughts on that.
Oh, I think that those are wonderful examples and just excellent points. And I think will have opportunities to kind of scaffold on that topic of creating packages, also in the context of thinking about what would you package together. So obviously lessons are things you could package together. And Fabiana, you've just been speaking to some other things you might consider. So the only thing I'd say first is that if you have thoughts or questions about what we're speaking about or other sort of disruptions that you're dealing with that you're hoping to get insights on, please go into the chat and feel free to jump jump in with any of those thoughts now. I will be, we'll both be reviewing them and I'll be monitoring them as Fabiana continues to give examples so we can tailor this content to you. The only thing I was going to suggest as a follow-up, and I'd love to hear what you think about this, Fabiana, is, when I think about the possibilities of packaging content, it also brings up the question of for whom, right? So we often think, and this is something that in our pre-meeting Fabiana brought up, and I've been thinking a lot about, is we often think about recruiting based on our geographic location for obvious reasons, because we're teaching in person and it's not realistic to drive 6 hours to go have a piano lesson or a music lesson of any type. But now, of course, that those distances don't matter. So what would it look like, for example, to imagine a studio potentially of students from across the globe, or at least from across a broader geographic region than ever before? Those are possibilities in this time. But of course, the question is, what are the mechanics of recruitment? So there are lots of different things that go into it. I think one of the ways would be through thinking about partnerships. You could perhaps create a particular activity. Let's say, group lessons are one thing that happen online that are, have already transitioned. We're moving into the summer. What about a summer camp that involved 4 teachers, maybe your colleagues from, NCKP or MTNA, the Francis Clark Center, people that you really respect and admire. This summer could be the summer to launch an online summer camp that would offer virtual instruction and coalesce sort of the resources of a few key people in your social circles to create a new kind of virtual experience that in some ways could even augment what you would offer in person anyways. So those are the kinds of things I think we're talking about here. Fabiana, I'd love to get your kind of perspective and tips on globalized recruitment and how teachers might go about thinking differently about how they reach out and identify students beyond their local region.
I love that, Jonathan. Thanks for sharing. That is so cool. And I think you've hit on a point that is so powerful, which is the opportunity we have for collaborating not only as colleagues and in our roles as teachers, but also to help our students collaborate amongst themselves. See, now with this online setup, the opportunity to offer group classes has completely opened up a new dimension to our teaching, where we no longer need to think only in the one-on-one setup, but now it's easier than ever and potentially more impactful than ever to help our students work in a group and to listen to the way we give them feedback, almost as in a virtual masterclass setting, where they have a chance to listen to each other perform, get input, and grow as a community. See, we're all so isolated and, having to be in this, surreal reality where we have to be in our own homes. And we are in a need as a society, in a need for community and connection more than ever before. So if you find ways to provide that community through your teaching, and you can communicate that in your marketing materials, in your recruitment efforts, as Jonathan was saying, how do you find students? How do you reach out beyond your current geographical limitations? I think a great way is by offering community, offering ways not only for students to work with multiple teachers in different perspectives and learn from different backgrounds, but also to work as a group. So why is also this a key business strategy? Because it allows you to also offer lesson packages where you're not necessarily limiting yourself to one-on-one, but you're offering group instruction where you have hot seats, so to speak, so students still get that one-on-one personalized attention in a shorter segment, and you have that in a group setting. So instead of teaching, 20 students a week, where you would have to have 20 hours in order to work with those students, if you can synthesize that into maybe 2 hours a week, where you put them all together and you have, let's say, groups of 10 in each, and you offer 1 hour a week for 10 students, and another hour a week for the other 10 students. Maybe you do like a performance virtual class, or you can have twice a week, and you can offer one time a performance class and the other time perhaps a technique class where you want to be diving in more into the nitty-gritty of technique and different elements of performance, and troubleshoot on the spot. So I would encourage all of you to start envisioning ways where you can perhaps limit your one-on-one teaching and consider instead offering more group instruction. And this in return not only gives students an opportunity to have that community aspect, but it also frees up your time significantly to be able to pursue additional things, to be able to continue developing your business, to be able to practice, to perform as teachers and educators in music. It is so common to lose your performing side because you're so overwhelmed and so busy with teaching, and the teaching in this traditional setting of one-on-one time versus money exchange can totally take over your life. So by now using this new reality and saying, how can I change the model where I teach more group settings than I do individual? This doesn't mean you would eliminate the individual instruction at all, but perhaps limit it to maybe once a month or once every 2 months. And there's also other ways you can deliver individual personalized feedback that don't require you to exchange time for money. For example, if students have direct access to you by being able to send you video clips of their trouble spots in their performances. I know many models of remarkable musicians throughout the world who offer that direct access option. So through WhatsApp, students can take a little video of their performing or a trouble spot that they're having in a particular piece, and the teacher on their own time can send some direct feedback on that. So there's still many ways that you can deliver that personalized one-on-one without it having to be 1 hour every week per student. So, and the good news about it is that we are in a moment where if you propose this to parents, it won't be an outrageous proposal. They won't be horrified by the thought of switching to online because they're all doing it now anyway. So there's never been a better time for you to propose the reinvention of your model, where you offer more group instruction, more instruction based on an ultimate transformation, on a particular goal that you want them to achieve in a specific amount of time, and to present that as a new way of teaching to parents, and to figure out how you can limit the one-on-one instruction to either have that direct access offline or perhaps maybe one lesson a month. There's a wonderful model that you could look at by Nathan Cole and by Lauren Pierce. These are two wonderful musicians who have gone on and switched their entire studios online, and they have group packages for 6 months, and they charge a premium price, and they're all group instructions with some one-on-one support, but it is not a weekly 1 hour per student type thing. And they're able to work with dozens and dozens of students and make 6-figure incomes because of the revised teaching model. So this is something that I would highly encourage all of our viewers to look at. Google Nathan Cole. He has a Virtuoso Master Course, and Lauren Pierce has I think it's called Virtuosity Roadmap or Virtuosity Blueprint, something like that. And there are many more models like these that I encourage you to look at and realize that this isn't something new. It's already been done, but the pandemic we're in right now is exposing this opportunity for many more teachers to adopt and reinvent their models.
Wonderful. I just wanted to jump in because we have a couple of questions that are, I think, dovetailing off or building off what you were just sharing, Fabiana. So I want to just kind of, they just popped up for me. I think some folks maybe posted them a little earlier, but I just saw them pop up. So I just want to jump in and maybe we can address them together. Two are sort of logistical ones. From Sylvia, I'm sorry, Sylvia, I'm probably gonna say your last name wrong. Furash has a beautiful question. Sorry about that, Sylvia. Has a great question, which is this idea of offering open office hours, and that's a really generous thing. And I think the idea of having sort of a certain amount of time or space, a sort of open door policy for students, of course, is something that is important, and we probably many of us have done that in different ways. But your question is about considering a required online 15-minute office hour for an additional fee. It's a great example, I think, right there, and I want to get Fabiana's feedback on this example of something that could be packaged in to a single kind of maybe fee or a monthly fee, for example, that includes a number of things. And that's sort of what Fabiana has been going into great detail on, right? It might include a certain number of one-on-one lessons or lesson time, some group activity, and maybe some office hours or some other types of exercises or activities that you curate and share. For those of us who have children at home, managing the education, I mean, and our child is, in a preschool, daycare, and we're getting virtual resources from them on a daily basis that are sort of self-study activities that we can help lead them through. So we can imagine the same kind of thing, activities that could be self-study or paced throughout a period of time. And Fabiana, I'd love to get your take on some of this office hours idea of packaging it potentially with lessons and other things that could be packaged together. Any other thoughts that you have about that?
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks, Jonathan. That's really helpful. I think the more we can engineer the program on our end, keeping in mind the needs of our clients and our students and our families, and present them something that's already pretty much baked, in other words, to just explain to them, this is the program, these are the features that I've built into them based on what I think is going to be valuable for you. It will include group lessons. It will include occasional, guest speakers, master classes. It will include community where students can connect and interact and support each other. It will include direct, personalized feedback and mentorship from me within the group setting. And it will include occasional access to me on a one-on-one basis. Those are key aspects that you can strategize to build into your program. And you don't really need to add much more, because if you make it too complicated, like you could add this and you could add that as added things, then it can be overwhelming for parents. So I would encourage you to envision the package in the way you would like to deliver it, being very strategic in connecting your time and not making it against time for a result, but instead making a result, a transformation opportunity for the student for a fixed fee. And that is it. To kind of shy away from the per hour or 15 minutes of this or 1 hour of that. Instead, to say your child will, achieve these pedagogical milestones. Or if you design this for, let's say, high school students who are about to enter university, your high schooler will, if you're a senior in college, they'll be able to have their, college audition ready by the end of these 6 months. They will be ready to go have this, program ready. You're offering an outcome. You're being very deliberate about what they're going to get as a result. And then the process, that's something that you can design in a way that is completely up to you. Here's where your own creative work and your own creativity as an artist and musician can come into play. But be very careful not to assign too much fixed time, because once again, the whole opportunity in these reinventions and these new models is that you shy away from that, where you're actually delivering more value in less time and making more money as a result. So if you give parents the proposal with everything built in, it's a better way to just present it to them and say, this is the new way I'm going to be teaching, and that's it. And not have them make too many decisions as to how many more features they could add in this and that, because it's going to be too overwhelming, I think, for some parents.
Yeah, great points. There's two quick follow-up questions here. And Melanie just asked a question about bringing up fees and the challenges of bringing up fees right now. I want to come back to that. There was one, Veronica had a question about sort of the second topic, I think, which is sort of supporting a community orchestra, and that's part of the brand building conversation. We're going to get to that in a moment. There was another question here I'd love to get your take on, Fabiana, from D. White, about it's a simple sort of protocol question about, is it better for the teacher to call the student on Zoom or better for the student to call the teacher? I guess the main thing I would want to consider is, if you're teaching back to back to back, you might want to be in control, right, of the calls. I know there's also the waiting room function in Zoom. Yeah. You can have students wait there. So Fabiana, what's your take on sort of the protocol for setting up those calls? Is it regardless of whether it's for a lesson or group experience, an office hour, I think it's better for the teachers to be calling the parents versus that other way around?
So actually, Zoom has made this very easy for all of us educators who've had to switch online, which is you have a personalized URL for your meeting room, okay? And it's a fixed meeting room URL that Zoom gives you. And you can get this even on the free account. So you give that URL to your students and you tell them during your lesson time, you're going to meet in this URL. So they meet you there, but you enable a waiting room. So they don't just pop in into the middle of your lesson. If you're finishing up with another student, you can have them wait for you in what is called a waiting room. And when you finish with a student, you can admit the next student into your like Zoom window. So that's something that can be easily managed through Zoom. It has that feature, and that's what my studio has been doing in Miami, and what my husband is doing here. So I think that would be very, very easy to do.
Highly recommend it. And I totally agree. And Zoom actually also has great background features. You can automatically create whatever background you want in your studio if you want to have some fun too. And for your students as well, that could be a nice fun element to play. But certainly Zoom is very helpful. Let's come back to the fees, because I think we were going to talk about some pricing issues and transition into the brand umbrella. Anyways, we have an exercise we want to kind of engage with you on. Beth had yes. So Edna just asked a question about marketing. We're going to get there in a moment. Beth had a question about what ages do each of us, I presume that question was for Fabiana and myself. I'm not sure. If the question is sort of the age of our studios, I actually don't teach privately piano right now. I'm at the University of Michigan, where I run the Entrepreneurship and Leadership program that serves students throughout the school, including graduate students in various instrumental disciplines and theater and dance as well. But I have a background teaching students from the very young ages of 5 or 6, all the way up to adult learners in group and private contexts. I ran a community music school prior to coming here at the University of Missouri for 4 years and taught privately separately. So Fabiana, I know you have a lot of experience also with your academy and teaching all different levels.
Yeah, I similarly to Jonathan, I am not offering private piano students at the moment. Private piano teaching. I have a music school in Miami with a variety of instructors that teach a variety of instruments. And my husband and I run that school remotely from Texas. So we have had to switch everything to online instruction, and this is how we've set it up through Zoom. And my husband teaches here as well. He has a private studio, and he teaches students from all ages as well and all levels. And so we've done the same Zoom switch in his studio here. So I no longer teach private piano. I'm the founder and director of the Music Business and Entrepreneurship program at the University of North Texas, where I help musicians create their careers and launch their businesses in school. And I also have a business coaching consulting program that I work with musicians from all over the world and helping them create new income opportunities and designing their careers and kind of reinventing themselves. So we'll talk more about this as we transition now to the brand umbrella strategy. So that's in a nutshell our answer to your question. I think Jonathan's muted.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to say we want to acknowledge all the value in all these questions. And even though there's some specific ones about pricing and marketing, actually all of those questions are tied to this concept of branding. How do you build a brand umbrella? Because pricing is actually, taught as a marketing a tool or principle related to not just the financial management of your enterprise, but the framing of value in the work that you do and communicating value. I think we all feel the pressure right now to be sensitive when we're talking about offering services and we want to earn a fair wage or fair price for it, knowing that so many of the people in our community have lost work, maybe in financially precarious situations. But the key to and I think Fabiana and I are sort of thinking in the same way about this, even though we have somewhat different backgrounds. In a way, is this idea of framing value as core to understanding how to price equitably, but also to understand how to frame that value for people who not just have the means, but who want to invest in this experience for their children or for themselves. So that's actually the beginning of branding, right? Is sort of reflecting on what the core values are and competencies are in your work, and that can be the catalyst for unlocking the best way to frame pricing for what you have to offer. So, for example, and Fabiana, you have a great exercise. I wonder if now would be a good time to just offer that up as a little exercise we could all go through very quickly to give an example of how you can start to explore the value, which could lead to pricing tools or tactics afterwards.
Sure. So if everyone could chime in the chat and put in, if you were to describe the value of what you do in 1 or 2 sentences, what would that say? So if you could chime in here, just what comes off of the top of your head. If someone were to meet you and say, oh, what do you do? And you're like, well, I teach piano. And why do you teach piano? What does that do for your students? What would your answer be? So we want to see what you write in there. What's the benefit of what you do? So we're going to let you wait on that then if you need a few minutes to think.
Yeah.
But feel free to chime in. Why do you do what you do? Like, what is the value of what you do? What do your students gain from the work? Assuming we're talking about piano teaching, but it doesn't have to be only about piano teaching.
Yeah.
But if you were to describe, what do people gain? They're already thinking. What do people gain from what you offer? Just write your first answer. Someone is meeting you who has no background in music and just says, oh, it's so good to meet you. What do you do? I teach piano. And what does that do for your students? Many times a key problem is that we are the experts in our field. We understand the value of what we do, but we don't quite take enough steps to explain that to others. And that makes our marketing efforts fall short. And it does not allow us to be effective in recruiting students and getting parents excited because we haven't taken the necessary steps to communicate the ultimate benefit of what we do. We think people are just going to get it. People are going to understand that music is good for you and what it does and piano and all of this. So this is an exercise to help you kind of be forced to articulate that value that you can describe in a nutshell. So we have here some great answers. Jonathan, you want to go over those? You're muted again.
Keeps turning off. Sorry. Okay. A lot of great examples here. Things like discipline, problem solving, self-confidence, self-expression. There's several responses here about learning to play piano for enrichment and enjoyment, making your life better, feeling happier, skill development, playing their instrument and developing a love for music for a lifetime. So responses seem to kind of straddle both the pursuit of developing an acumen that might lead to further study, or who knows, I'm sure we have teachers in the room who prepare students for collegiate study and beyond, and others who are teaching people to become lifelong music lovers, hobbyists, and amateur musicians. I love the response here of creating confidence, creating beautiful humans. So there's sort of broad representations of value and specific transferable skills like self-discipline, creativity, and a sense of accomplishment.
So part of this exercise, though, is to push you all a little bit more. So you submitted this initial question, and now we're going to ask you, and what does that do for your students? So if someone were to listen to your first answer and say, oh, someone wrote, many students already enjoy music and know how to learn. Oh, know how to learn and share their music. And what does that do for them? Why is it good that they know how to learn and share their music? So for all of you who wrote an answer, now the follow-up question is, and what does that do for your students? What does that do for them? In which way does that benefit them? So I'm curious to see the next responses for all of you who wrote an answer. Keep thinking, what is the value? What's the benefit of developing discipline skills, developing self-confidence, increasing your self-confidence? What does that do for students?
I'm just going to give as people are thinking and contributing, I'm just going to give a little sidebar for context for this exercise, which is beautifully framed by Fabiana here for you. It's actually has its roots in lean startup and the design thinking process, which goes back now decades, and actually is tied into the entrepreneurial process of identifying core problems or core values at the heart of different types of enterprises. And so this is a really grounded example of the visioning process, the ideation process that will lead to a ability to better frame all the layers of value in the teaching or performance or whatever professional activities you pursue, which is key to making the argument for what the total value is, the value proposition for your customers and your community.
So Sandra wrote, keeps his Spanish heritage through music, 2 languages, because she teaches music in Spanish in Canada. Now we're talking. And then, we have here Caroline, gives my students confidence and a fun physical outlet for their emotions and creative side. Wonderful. So we have here some wonderful answers based on this new question. But if we were to go ahead and ask you a third time, and what does that do for your students? Again, your initial reaction would be, but I already said it. Like, this is self-explanatory. I'm already saying, what I'm doing and how that helps. But if I were to ask you, can you go deeper? Can you push yourself harder to articulate in which way does that help them? In which way does that secure a path for them in their life? In which way does that ultimately allow them to have more opportunities for having income, for having networking connections, for having just a overall fulfilled life? Like, how can you make this so easy to understand, so clear in terms of the benefits, that you can then put all of that in your messaging, in your website, in your marketing materials, in your social media posts? You're not only saying, I'm teaching music, I'm teaching piano for my students to gain confidence, but you're actually taking it many, many layers further and explaining, in order for them to be more successful in college, in order for them to be able to find, the professional opportunities that are going to lead them to leadership positions, perhaps, that are going to give them the skills to become innovators in their field, in their industry, that are going to give them the pathways to becoming profitable, becoming financially, literate, becoming financially secure. Any way you can take what you're doing through your music to the end result of how that's really going to change the lives of your students is what you need to be thinking much beyond. It helps them boost their confidence. It helps them, live happy. Think way deeper. That's kind of the purpose of this exercise. And use those materials in your messaging, in your website, in your marketing materials. Look for that ultimate benefit. I think the exercise in its original form goes through like 5 whys. So you're given an answer to a business proposition, and you have to answer 5 times. And why is that important? And why is that important? So if you're able to answer that 5 times and get to the root benefit, then now you're starting to really understand how to be effective in communicating what sets you apart and why people should want what you offer.
Yeah, I just want to, this is a beautiful example, Fabiana, explanation of how to do this. And I see the responses are so impressive here. So many people are responding in real time. You can take more time to do this, right? Take some time to reflect. This is merely just an exercise to help start prompting that thinking. I want to just address a couple of follow-ups to this as we talk about this brand umbrella. So on the one hand, absolutely, this work is about helping you frame maybe a revised sort of set of messages or clearer messages around the things that you currently offer. It's also an opportunity to examine the platform of future opportunities for products or services, things that you want to offer that you haven't yet offered. So for example, we have a lot of responses here that basically point to the value, it seems like in this group of people we're sharing time with today, around artist citizenship, how learning to be a musician and learning those skills can actually ultimately translate to being better members, a strong positive member of society. So you might say, well, okay, there's a limit to how much I can make my student, my 5-year-old or my 8-year-old or my 12-year-old into a leader through piano lessons. And that's true. We all have a limited amount of time, even if we're thinking about all these savvy ways to expand the scale of our operations. But let's say for a moment that we know that there's a limit to the potential for leadership training, or we think in our own particular practice, there's a limit to leadership training. The question we can posit then, though, knowing what this core value is of what you have to offer through your teaching or performance work, is what other things could you offer that would contribute to that larger core mission of helping people become positive members of society. It might be a summer camp where you develop some other team building skills or whatever. It could be something else. This is just pointing to the question from Veronica a while back about serving a local community symphony orchestra. Some of the things that you might come up with through this exercise, this ideation exercise, is a totally different branch of your business or of your work that actually serves another community need. That could be fundraising activities for that community need. It could be a collaboration with that other organization. And by the way, it'll help frame the value of the total package. And there was a question before about bringing up fees. Well, remember what Fabiana was just pointing out is that the goal for these packages is to increase your capacity, right, to earn and build sustainable income through a small, like without the limitation of hours, through a smaller number of hours, which means you might actually be able to lower the price per person in some circumstances. Just because your goal is to increase your own personal income or create stability in this time does not necessarily mean that the prices have to go up for every single person or for your students. And in fact, now is probably not the time to be raising prices. But thinking in this way might actually allow you to achieve both things, to generate more stable income by creating these sort of packages, but also with strong branding, but also communicating the lowered cost per individual. That's going to be more successful when you can articulate not just what the short-term value is of being in that lesson, but what the goal of that total experience is over the course of the year. You could even set some benchmark goals around things like leadership and creative problem solving and resiliency. And that might involve other types of exercises or activities that challenge students to develop in those ways. I love these are, if you can respond in the moment to these prompts in this kind of way, just know that you are all well poised to come up with some other branding frameworks around core values if you were to spend 20 or 30 minutes a couple of days a week for the next couple of weeks exploring this idea. Fabiana, since I know we don't have a ton of time left, I think now would be a good time, since we've set the stage for imagining new projects. I'm sure people are thinking, what might those be? Could you maybe talk us through the brand umbrella idea of how to expand your core business by creating consistency, aligning those new offerings with this sort of core mission, and what that could look like?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Jonathan. What I really work on with my clients and the musicians that I coach is on synthesizing the different elements of your identity that come from your professional side and your personal side, and creating what's called a brand umbrella, which is essentially a way to unify the things you do and create a new way for you to generate money. So as musicians, we generally tend to have many different activities. Our careers are multifaceted in so many ways. And it's very often that we think we just have to live them in isolation and execute these different activities independently from each other. So the concept of creating a brand umbrella and the system that I've designed around this is about actually not thinking of them as separate and thinking how you can unite everything that you are, including your personal skills and personal interests, into a clear business proposition that allows you to offer new income opportunities for yourself, and also to create new products and services for the people you serve. So to give you an example, in my life, I've been mostly trained as a pianist. And towards the end of my career, I started learning about business and understanding the end of my academic career, learning, being a student. In my doctorate degree, I was immersed in studies related to music business and entrepreneurship. And I started seeing the relationship between what I had been doing as a pianist and educator with the way I had been running my studio. And I started exploring ways into creating a music academy along with my husband and building a business plan. And it was only in that moment where I joined my side as a musician with my interest in business that I was able to create a unified identity under a brand umbrella system and present a business plan in a competition, get a lot of support, get investors involved, raise money, and start a school. And then fast forward 5 years of running this school where I would not only teach piano, but also run the business and learn about all of the sides of working with clients and marketing and business development and finances, that the opportunity to create a new program at the University of North Texas popped into my inbox. And I was, at that point, I had been teaching piano, but I had been running a business. And I never really thought that I would be teaching music business or teaching students how to do this, but I was doing it myself. So in that moment, I said, well, what if I unite these two sides of me and put it under a brand umbrella and present myself as a candidate for this position? So instead of seeing them as separate things, I united them once again and presented it. And so this allowed me to be offered the position and to start the program that I have and to help musicians build their careers and launch their businesses while in school. And yet again, many years later, a few years later, I am now a mother. I have 2 children, and I am interested in playing. I want to continue keeping that side of me alive. And I also am running this, music business program at the University of North Texas. So I created yet again a new umbrella where I'm presenting programs, concerts, and working on a multimedia program that involves presenting the works of women as musician entrepreneurs and playing music by women composers and talking about their lives and how entrepreneurship played a role in their trajectory, and presenting this in a variety of formats through performing, through speaking about their lives, and also through multimedia. I'm collaborating with a filmmaker and creating films that go along the stories of these women that I'm highlighting. So, and at the same time, I'm working now in my consulting business, helping women musicians and musician mothers launch their careers and find ways to create income opportunities for themselves by doing the same thing, by uniting the different aspects of what they do, creating a brand umbrella, and developing new models, in many ways shying away from the time versus money exchange that I discussed earlier, and instead creating packages and using the internet and the online world we're in ways that allows them to get more results for themselves and for their students, while also spending less time and having more time for their own creative work. So these are just examples of different ways I've been able to personally use the concept of a brand umbrella, both to create business opportunities for myself, to launch ventures, but also to find opportunities for employment in organizations. So I think no matter which way you want to go, whether you want to do this as a self-employed route or to find opportunities to make yourself more attractive for positions in arts organizations or universities, or to have a blend of both, I think thinking of how you can connect the different aspects of your life, including your personal side, your interests, and connecting those and finding ways to create a unified sense of identity can help you understand what's the ultimate value that only you provide for your clients, and that sets you apart, right? Because we're oftentimes trying to figure out what is different about what I do. There's so many piano teachers, for example. What is it about me and my teaching that makes me stand out, that makes me able to serve a specific group of people? Well, guess what? It is not just the fact that you teach piano or that you play the piano really well, because a lot of people do that. It's all the other aspects of your identity, your background, where you come from, and in most cases, the obstacles you've had to overcome. What are the challenges you've had to overcome, and what have you learned from those? And most likely those obstacles, those things you've had in your life to overcome, can become your greatest assets to help other people overcome obstacles themselves. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the framework of the brand umbrella system that I use in my coaching.
That's wonderful. Well, we have lots of comments, and Lois Owsley just mentioned that you are amazing and very inspirational, which I agree with.
Thank you.
And that's why it's so great that you're here on this webinar, because you really epitomize the potential of thinking about this brand umbrella or extending from your kind of core business in a way that feels really authentic and tapped into the things you believe in. And that's the thing what we should all be aiming for. I think one of the things we should mention, this might be a good time to do the second exercise, is that it's really tough if we think about all the things you were just mentioning, things we've overcome. Some of us may be struggling right now with, I don't know exactly where to begin. I have a general idea that I want to improve my studio or my business, my portfolio. But what this example that we just heard is sort of the fully flourished example that took years to develop. So how do you start? Well, we've been thinking about that too. A great sort of second exercise and we'll be happy to share all this information. People ask if there's going to be a little sheet or resource list, which we're happy to compile. We'll also reshare our names and information as well. Happy to stay in touch with all of you. But if once you have sort of gone through this process of starting to unpack what that core value is, now you have an opportunity to explore what's the first step, the first project, or the first idea for a new kind of output, whether that's a new package or an addition to what you already offer. I'm going to share my screen now just so we can talk through that as a simple example. If I can remember how to do that here. Yeah, here we go. I'm going to share this exercise, which I think should come up. Hopefully you can see this.
Yes.
So I don't have time to go through the whole story of the hedgehog, but essentially this exercise comes from some sort of legendary research done about 20 years ago that examined what separates highly successful entrepreneurs and organizations from the status quo, and it's been adapted in many ways into the arts and social sectors. We're going to talk about it today just in terms of how you can use it as individuals. The idea is that truly sort of exceptional and exceptionally successful individuals, and that's not just necessarily how much money they make, but the impact that they make through their work. Those who really have defined that identity, as Fabiana just explained in a really clear way, they tend to operate using the hedgehog concept. And the hedgehog concept basically posits that you make 3 lists. The first list is a list of things that you are truly passionate about. And you might start with this little exercise of unpacking the value. Maybe you have a list of 5 responses to the question, why do you do what you do? What's the value in what you do, over and over again? And populate from that list the shorter list of maybe 5 to 10 things you are truly passionate about. They could be musically related, but also beyond that, as Fabiana mentioned. So are there other things that you're passionate about, whether that's wellness or culinary expertise, anything that really defines you? You feel like if you had to pick these 5 things to take with you to a desert island, what would those 5 activities be? And then make a similar list of the sort of superior abilities that you have. What are the 5 things that stand out in terms of your skills and capacity? Doing a full skills inventory is beyond the scope of our time today, but we can probably share some resources on how to do that. You could look for friends or colleagues and maybe some feedback you've received in the past to help you identify what are the top maybe 3 to 5 skills that really define you and set you apart. And then the third list is a list of areas of need. This could be based in your local community. It could be based now, since we're more virtually connected than ever, a need that you've identified in a virtual community context. This is the hardest one to populate a large list. So you might just start with 1 or 2. What's the top need that you see in your local community or in some community that you care about? Your job then, once you've populated those lists and taken some time to reflect, is to identify, brainstorm 1 project or role that you could play that draws from something from your passions or something from at least one of your core abilities, your skills, to address that need. That will put you at the center of the hedgehog concept, which is essentially the intersection of the passions, the things you really care about, the things you're really good at, and the things the world needs. That is what we could identify as an ideal role for you to explore, whether that's expanding your current practice in creating unity and around your brand, or it's something new. I think Veronica, somebody mentioned that they're thinking about pivoting in their personal life, and as much as maybe they have identities as a musician, they want to help a community organization. There's nothing to say that you can't use these tools we talked about today to create a new role for yourself in your community, which might not involve making music, but supporting the arts in a different way. You could be the connector that supports people who want to support the arts and still have the means to do so and come up with interesting ideas for supporting and raising funds or awareness for that community organization. So this is a very flexible model and something that you could probably complete in an hour or 2 on your own time. The idea is that if you can brainstorm that 1 or 2 ideal role, that thing, that project, or that a role you could play, you're well positioned to start exploring how to expand your brand. And to start to galvanize and bring together some people in your community to explore that idea further. I'm going to go ahead and I think stop sharing now.
You can leave it there, Jonathan.
Okay, yeah.
Add something to that.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. This is, I think, going to be very helpful. And I'd also like to encourage you, as you go through this exercise, to make sure that whatever project you come up with gives you the lifestyle that you want. In other words, in addition to going through this exercise in order to find what you could do, you also should make a vision board and understand what would you like your life to look like? And how can you frame this activity, this business, whatever it is you're putting together through this concept, in a way that is going to allow your personal goals to happen. So for example, if you want to have more time for your creative works, if you feel that you haven't been practicing, I hear this a lot, and I've experienced this a lot myself, especially as women and when we become mothers and when we take on, leadership roles and work and different adventures. Many times our artistic side tends to kind of go into the back burner because we tend to prioritize the things we're doing in the moment, and then we miss it, and then we feel like something is not there in our lives, and we have this need to bring it back. So instead of waiting for you to get to that like rock bottom, so to speak, where you're feeling upset, where you're frustrated, where you're disappointed, where you're not fulfilled, if you are in this process of ideation, of designing your ideal activity, your ideal life, a new option, a new proposition for your students, for your clients, make sure you put yourself in there too. Like, what do you need? What are the things that you want to make sure you have time for in your life? Do you want to exercise more? Do you want to, find the time to cook more, to have more time to prepare your meals? Do you want to have more time for your family? What is it that you really want to be able to do in your life? And how can you create a business that is going to make that happen for you? As educators and musicians, we're just tend to be very giving, and that's a wonderful thing, but also finding that balance between what you want to offer with what you need in your life and how you can make those two become harmonious.
Great points. So the idea here, I think, it's a beautiful moment for us to do a little takeaway, which is that by using these sort of thought tools, these sort of strategic tools, we can start with a reflective practice that helps us unpack the core value, maybe the value that we have never articulated or never fully articulated around the work that we already do, and also can help us imagine new resources, new offerings that would enrich our community, solve community problems, and enhance the value of what we have to offer, but also enhance our own livelihood and our lifestyle in a way that is not at the expense of the world, not at the expense of our students, but actually creates a win-win scenario for them and for us as teachers. And Fabiana, I love how you framed throughout the whole talk the value and the importance of taking these moments of crisis or disruption as opportunities to do this kind of work. The history is riddled with, crisis creates the necessity for invention and innovation. I think that music teachers and musicians are supremely positioned to do that because of the nature of our work, right? The nature of doing the things you just mentioned, which is awakening creativity and imagination in other people. So even though we don't often think about ourselves in those terms, I think we're all poised to use these models in ways that can help develop new opportunities. So thank you all for being here. Fabiana, thank you so much for the opportunity to co-present this with you. I think it's been a really wonderful conversation. I know we're going to be following up with a little resource list. Anything else that you'd like to share, Fabiana?
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. And I too have enjoyed having an opportunity to share all of these thoughts with you. Thank you for your insightful comments and moderating the whole discussion. It was awesome. I am so grateful for everyone who chimed in, who was enthusiastically commenting on everything we're saying. Please know that I'm very interested in continuing this conversation and would love the opportunity for any questions beyond this webinar. Feel free to reach out to me through my website at fabianaclore.com. And if you're, wondering how this could apply to you, if you have any curiosities and questions on, designing your own brand umbrella around your life and how this could become potentially new sources of income for you, feel free to reach out to me. You can even book a call through my site. So I just wanted all of you to know that I'm available and willing to support you in any way that I can. So feel free to reach out, and I'll let Jonathan say the last words.
That's it. It's been a lot. That's a beautiful way to finish. I love the optimism of all the messages. I know when we're in a virtual environment, it can feel depersonalized, but I felt like we're in the midst of some really creative and inspiring people. So thanks for the opportunity to do this, to the Francis Clark Center, and for inviting us to do this. And we look forward to staying connected. We'll communicate with our colleagues at Francis Clark about that resource sheet and share it through their channels as soon as we can.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. Thank you, Jonathan.
Take care.